Broward County, Florida, 2018. The marriage license was filed on a Thursday morning in late March, processed without ceremony at the county clerk's office in downtown Fort Lauderdale. The bride was 24 years old. The groom was 71. The application listed her country of origin as Haiti and her current immigration status as pending. His address had remained unchanged for 32 years. Camille Laurent arrived in the United States 6 months earlier on a visitor visa issued through a church sponsorship program coordinated between Port-au-Prince and a network of evangelical congregations across South Florida. The visa allowed her a 90-day stay with the stated purpose of attending religious conferences and English language instruction. The return ticket in her file was dated for December 2017. She did not use it. Her background, as documented through interviews conducted later, reflected circumstances common to young women leaving Haiti during that period. She had completed secondary school in Pétionville, a hillside district above Port-au-Prince, where her family rented 2 rooms in a concrete house shared with another family. Her father worked intermittently in construction. Her mother sold produce at a street market. Camille had 3 younger siblings. The household income, even in stable months, fell below subsistence. Before leaving, Camille had worked as a clerk at a small import office near the port, handling invoices and shipping documents. The pay was irregular. The office closed for weeks at a time when container shipments stalled. She spoke Haitian Creole and functional French. Her English, at the time of her arrival, was limited to phrases learned in school and reinforced through American church volunteers who visited her congregation in Port-au-Prince. The sponsoring church in Fort Lauderdale provided temporary housing in a women's dormitory operated by the ministry. Camille attended services, participated in Bible study groups, and enrolled in an ESL program held 3 evenings per week in the church basement. The structure was deliberate and closely monitored. Residents were expected to adhere to strict schedules, attend all required programming, and avoid unauthorized outside contact. Most did. Camille did not. By November 2017, her visa had expired. She did not report to immigration authorities. Instead, she moved out of the dormitory and into a shared apartment with 2 other Haitian women in a neighborhood west of Interstate 95, where rent was cheaper and oversight minimal. She found work cleaning houses through an informal network that operated entirely in cash. The jobs were inconsistent, the pay below minimum wage, and the legal risk constant. She sent what little she could back to her family, usually through informal transfer services that charged high fees but asked no questions. Richard Brennan was 71 years old and lived alone in a single-story ranch house in Plantation, a suburb west of Fort Lauderdale. He had purchased the property in 1986, shortly after his second divorce. Tax records showed the mortgage paid off in full by 1998. Neighbors described him as solitary and precise. He maintained his lawn with obsessive regularity, parked his sedan in the same spot each evening, and rarely engaged in conversation beyond polite acknowledgement. Brennan had retired from a career in municipal property assessment. His work involved appraising commercial real estate for tax purposes, reviewing documentation, and appearing at dispute hearings. It was detail-oriented, bureaucratic, and largely invisible. Colleagues remembered him as competent but unpleasant, someone who enforced procedure without flexibility and took satisfaction in finding discrepancies others had missed. His financial position was stable but unremarkable. He received a pension from the county, Social Security benefits, and modest income from a rental property he owned in a neighboring town. Bank records later reviewed during the investigation showed disciplined saving, minimal discretionary spending, and no significant debts. He lived within a tightly controlled budget and tracked expenses in a ledger he kept in a desk drawer. Brennan's personal history included 2 failed marriages, both ending in the 1980s. Neither produced children. Court records from the second divorce included allegations of controlling behavior and emotional cruelty, though no criminal charges were filed. After the divorce was finalized, he ceased all social relationships that required reciprocity. He attended no church, joined no clubs, and maintained no friendships that involved invitations or shared activities. The introduction between Camille Laurent and Richard Brennan occurred through a casual labor job in early January 2018. Camille had been hired, along with 2 other women, to clean Brennan's house in preparation for a minor renovation. The work took most of a day. Brennan remained home throughout, observing the process from his recliner in the living room. At some point during the afternoon, he engaged Camille in conversation. He asked where she was from, how long she had been in the country, and whether she had family here. His tone was neutral, neither warm nor invasive. Camille answered politely in broken English. Before the crew left, Brennan offered her additional work cleaning his house on a regular basis, bypassing the service and hiring her directly. Over the following weeks, Camille returned to the house twice per week. Brennan paid her in cash, slightly above what the service had provided, and always on time. He began asking more personal questions. He learned that her visa had lapsed, that she was sending money home, and that she feared deportation. He did not express alarm or judgment. Instead, he acknowledged the difficulty of her situation and suggested, in passing, that there were legal options she might not have considered. By late February, the suggestion became explicit. Brennan proposed marriage. He framed it as a practical solution to her immigration problem and a mutually beneficial arrangement. She would gain legal status. He would gain reliable household assistance and companionship on his terms. He made no romantic overtures and offered no affection. The proposal was transactional, presented in the same measured tone he used to discuss payment for cleaning. Camille did not immediately accept. She consulted with one of her roommates, who had married an American citizen under similar circumstances, and successfully adjusted her status. The roommate described the process as straightforward, if properly managed, and warned that opportunities like this were rare. Camille also spoke by phone with her mother in Port-au-Prince, explaining the situation in Creole. Her mother's response was unambiguous. Do what you must to stay. Send what you can. 3 weeks later, Camille agreed. There was no engagement ring, no ceremony planning, and no announcement to family or friends. Brennan handled the paperwork himself, filling out forms with bureaucratic precision and scheduling the civil appointment without consultation. On the morning of the marriage, Camille wore a plain dress she had brought from Haiti. Brennan wore slacks and a button-down shirt. They signed the license in the presence of a clerk and 2 courthouse employees who served as witnesses. The entire process took less than 20 minutes. Afterward, Brennan drove them back to his house. Camille's belongings, 2 suitcases and a duffel bag, had been brought over the night before. He showed her to the smaller of the 2 bedrooms, a space that had been used for storage. He had cleared it out, but made no other preparations. The room contained a twin bed, a dresser, and a closet. He told her she would sleep there. He did not explain further, and she did not ask. That evening, Brennan prepared a simple meal and explained the household rules. She would continue cleaning, cooking, and managing errands. In exchange, he would file the necessary immigration paperwork and cover household expenses. She was expected to maintain the appearance of a legitimate marriage in all official contexts. Beyond that, he preferred minimal interaction. She was not to invite guests to the house, make long-distance calls without permission, or leave for extended periods without notifying him first. Camille listened without objection. She understood the terms. The arrangement was not built on affection or trust. It was built on necessity and control, and from the moment the marriage license was signed, the balance of power had already shifted in a direction she had not fully anticipated. The immigration filing began in early April 2018. Richard Brennan completed the Form Wine 130 petition for alien relative himself, refusing offers of legal assistance despite the complexity of the process. He gathered documentation methodically: marriage certificate, birth certificates, tax returns, bank statements, utility bills showing shared residence. Each document was photocopied, organized in labeled folders, and filed in chronological order. Camille's role in the process was passive. She provided her Haitian passport, signed forms where Brennan indicated, and answered questions he posed while filling out biographical sections. She did not read the applications herself. Her English had improved through months of immersion, but legal terminology remained opaque. Brennan did not offer translations or explanations beyond what was necessary for her signature. The filing fee was substantial. Brennan paid it by check and kept the receipt in a separate envelope marked immigration expenses. He told Camille that the money came from his savings and that she would be expected to repay him through continued household work. He did not specify an amount or timeline. The debt remained undefined, a tool for leverage rather than a financial obligation with clear terms. Within weeks of filing, the household dynamic shifted. Brennan began monitoring Camille's movements with increasing precision. He asked where she was going when she left the house, what time she would return, and who she planned to see. If she returned later than stated, he demanded explanation. His tone during these interrogations was calm, but insistent, the same voice he had used in property dispute hearings to identify inconsistencies in testimony. Camille's contact with her roommates diminished. Brennan discouraged visits, stating that immigration officials sometimes conducted unannounced home inspections and that the presence of other Haitian women might raise questions about the legitimacy of the marriage. He told her that phone calls to Haiti were expensive and suggested she limit them to once per month. When she protested, he reminded her that he was paying for the phone line and that expenses needed to be controlled until her status was resolved. By May, Camille's world had contracted to the house, the grocery store, and occasional trips to the post office or bank to run errands for Brennan. She stopped attending the Haitian church she had visited when she first arrived. Brennan argued that consistent church attendance at a different congregation, one he selected, would appear more credible to immigration authorities. The church he chose was predominantly white, English-speaking, and located 15 miles from any Haitian community. Camille attended twice and then stopped going altogether. Financial control tightened in parallel. Brennan provided Camille with a small weekly allowance, describing it as spending money for personal items. The amount was $20, given in cash every Sunday. He did not provide her with access to bank accounts or credit cards. When she asked about opening her own account, he explained that doing so might complicate the immigration case by suggesting financial independence rather than marital interdependence. She accepted the explanation because she had no framework to challenge it. Household rules became more specific. Brennan compiled a written list of tasks, organized by day of the week. Monday was laundry and bedroom cleaning. Tuesday was kitchen deep cleaning and grocery shopping. Wednesday was bathrooms and floors. The list continued through Saturday. Sunday was reserved for meal preparation for the coming week. Deviations from the schedule required prior approval. Brennan checked completed tasks each evening, running his finger along surfaces and inspecting corners. Camille's bedroom remained separate, but Brennan's presence in her space increased. He entered without knocking to deliver folded laundry or retrieve items he claimed belonged in other parts of the house. He commented on the arrangement of her belongings, suggesting better organizational methods. Once, he found a small photograph of her family taped to the wall above her bed and removed it, stating that personal decorations should be kept to a minimum in case of inspections. The first incident of explicit control occurred in mid-June. Camille received a phone call from her mother, who was using a neighbor's phone because the family could not afford one. The call came in the early evening while Brennan was watching television. Camille answered in the kitchen, speaking in Creole. Her mother's voice was strained. One of Camille's younger brothers had been injured in a motorcycle accident and required medical care the family could not afford. Camille's mother asked if she could send money beyond the usual monthly amount. Camille said she would try. When the call ended, Brennan was standing in the doorway. He asked what the conversation had been about. Camille explained in halting English, her voice unsteady. Brennan listened without interrupting. When she finished, he told her that additional funds were not available and that her family would need to manage the situation on their own. Camille protested. She offered to find additional cleaning work to earn the money. Brennan refused, stating that outside employment could jeopardize her immigration case and that she was already obligated to him for expenses he had covered. He reminded her that the petition was pending, that nothing was guaranteed, and that cooperation was essential. The conversation ended without resolution. Camille retreated to her bedroom. She did not call her mother back. In July, the first notice arrived from U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. It was a receipt confirming that the I-130 petition had been accepted for processing. Brennan opened the envelope at the kitchen table and read the letter aloud, emphasizing sections about estimated wait times and the requirement for a joint interview. He told Camille that the interview would determine everything and that they needed to be prepared to demonstrate a genuine marriage. Preparation, as Brennan defined it, involved memorization. He created lists of facts they both needed to know. The date they met, the date of their first conversation, his birthday, her birthday, the name of the street where they lived, the color of the bedroom curtains, his favorite meal. He quizzed her in the evenings, correcting mistakes and repeating questions until her answers matched his exactly. The drills were relentless and clinical, stripped of any pretense of relationship building. By late summer, Camille had stopped smiling. Her weight had dropped noticeably. She moved through the house with mechanical efficiency, completing tasks in silence. The few people who saw her, a cashier at the grocery store, a postal worker, a neighbor trimming hedges, later described her as distant and subdued. No one asked if she was all right. No one reported concern. The final shift occurred in September. Brennan informed Camille that her weekly allowance was being reduced to $10 because household expenses had increased. He did not provide documentation or explanation. When she asked what expenses had changed, he told her that managing the household budget was his responsibility, not hers, and that questioning his decisions was inappropriate given her dependence on his support. That night, Camille sat in her bedroom with the door closed and calculated the months since she had arrived in Florida. It had been 10. The life she had imagined, legal status, steady work, money sent home, felt further away than it had when she was cleaning houses for cash and sleeping on a borrowed mattress. The arrangement she had accepted as temporary now felt permanent. And Richard Brennan, who had presented himself as a solution, had become the structure of a cage she had built around herself by signing a single piece of paper. October brought the scheduled biometrics appointment. Camille was fingerprinted at a USCIS application support center in Miami, a facility with airport-style security and numbered waiting areas. Brennan accompanied her, sitting in the adjacent chair and monitoring her interactions with staff. She answered questions in monosyllables, provided identification when requested, and left without incident. The entire process took 90 minutes. On the drive back, Brennan reviewed what had occurred. He critiqued the way she had responded to a clerk's casual question about how long they had been married, noting that her answer had been vague. He reminded her that precision mattered, that immigration officers were trained to detect inconsistencies, and that a single misstep could result in denial. Camille stared out the window and said nothing. The following week, a letter arrived scheduling the joint interview for late November. Brennan read it twice, then placed it in the immigration file. He informed Camille that preparation would intensify. They began practicing scripted conversations, simulating questions officers might ask. He played the role of interrogator, firing questions without pause. How did you propose? Where did you go on your first date? What side of the bed does your wife sleep on? Camille's answers were hesitant, shaped more by repetition than memory. One evening in mid-October, Camille asked Brennan if she could visit a friend who lived in North Miami, a Haitian woman she had known from the church dormitory. Brennan asked why the visit was necessary. Camille explained that the woman's daughter was having a birthday party and had invited her. Brennan denied the request. He stated that socializing outside the household created unnecessary risk and that immigration investigators sometimes followed applicants to verify behavior patterns. Camille argued, her voice rising for the first time in weeks. Brennan responded by walking to his desk, retrieving the immigration file and placing it on the kitchen table. He told her that he could withdraw the petition at any time, that her legal status depended entirely on his cooperation, and that defiance was not in her interest. Camille did not attend the birthday party. She also stopped asking for permission to leave the house for non-essential reasons. The isolation deepened. Phone calls to Haiti ceased entirely. Brennan had changed the phone plan to block international numbers, citing cost savings. Camille's contact with her family was reduced to brief emails sent from Brennan's computer under his supervision. The messages were formulaic, written in broken English rather than Creole, and contained no personal detail beyond generic reassurances that she was fine. In early November, Camille's mother sent a message through a cousin who had access to Facebook. The message reached Camille indirectly, passed through a former roommate who still had her phone number. The content was urgent. Her younger brother, the one injured in June, had developed complications and required surgery. The family had borrowed money at high interest and could not repay it. They needed help. Camille waited until Brennan left for a doctor's appointment before calling her former roommate from a neighbor's phone. The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. Camille explained her situation in Creole, speaking quickly. She had no access to money, no freedom to work, and no ability to send help. Her roommate asked if she was safe. Camille hesitated before answering. She said she did not know. When Brennan returned, he noticed Camille's agitation. He asked where she had been. She lied, stating she had been in the backyard hanging laundry. He checked the backyard. The laundry line was empty. He asked again. This time, Camille admitted she had used a neighbor's phone to call Haiti. Brennan's expression did not change, but his voice dropped to a flat monotone. He told her that unauthorized phone calls violated their agreement and demonstrated poor judgment during a critical period in the immigration process. He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten. Instead, he went to his desk and retrieved a blank piece of paper. He wrote a list of new restrictions. No use of neighbors' phones. No communication with anyone outside the household without prior approval. No leaving the property without his knowledge. He placed the list on the refrigerator with a magnet and told her to read it daily. That night, Camille lay awake in the small bedroom, staring at the ceiling. The walls felt closer than they had before. She thought about the house in Pétionville, crowded and chaotic, where her brothers argued over space and her mother sang while cooking. She thought about the street market, the church where she had felt safe, the friends who had warned her that marriage to an American was not always the solution it appeared to be. She had ignored the warnings because she believed she understood the terms. She had been wrong. Brennan had not married her to provide help or companionship. He had married her to acquire control, and every piece of documentation filed with immigration reinforced his authority. The petition was not her pathway to freedom. It was the mechanism of her captivity. On November 12th, 6 days before the scheduled interview, Camille made a decision. She waited until Brennan fell asleep, then gathered her identification documents, the small amount of cash she had hidden in her dresser. and a single change of clothes. She unlocked the front door and stepped into the night. She walked 3 blocks before realizing she had nowhere to go. Her former roommates had moved. The church dormitory no longer accepted unannounced visitors. She had no money for a bus ticket and no phone to call for help. She returned to the house before dawn. Brennan was still asleep. She placed her belongings back in the dresser and lay down on the twin bed, staring at the ceiling until morning light filtered through the blinds. The interview was 6 days away. After that, Camille Laurent would disappear. The interview was scheduled for November 18th at 9:00 a.m. at the USCIS field office in Miami. Brennan prepared with the same methodical attention he had applied to property assessments, creating a binder of supporting documents organized by category: photographs, joint financial records, lease agreements, utility bills showing both names. He rehearsed answers to anticipated questions and timed the drive to the office twice to ensure they would arrive early. Camille's preparation was different. She had stopped eating regular meals. Her responses during practice sessions became mechanical, delivered without inflection or eye contact. Brennan noticed, but attributed it to nervousness rather than resignation. He told her that anxiety was normal and that maintaining composure during the interview was essential. On the morning of November 16th, 2 days before the interview, Brennan woke at his usual time and followed his established routine. He showered, dressed, and walked to the kitchen to prepare coffee. Camille's bedroom door was closed. This was not unusual. She rarely emerged before he called for her. At 7:30, Brennan knocked on her door. There was no response. He knocked again, louder. Silence. He opened the door. The room was empty. The bed had been made with hospital corners, the surface smooth and tight. The dresser drawers were closed. The closet door was shut. Nothing appeared disturbed. Brennan checked the bathroom. Empty. He walked through the house, opening doors and looking in spaces too small to conceal a person. He checked the backyard, the garage, and the front porch. Camille was not there. Her purse was gone. So was her identification and the prepaid cell phone he had recently purchased for her to use only for immigration-related communication. Brennan returned to her bedroom and conducted a more thorough search. He opened the dresser drawers. Most of her clothing remained. He checked the closet. Her winter coat was missing, along with a pair of sneakers. He found no note, no indication of where she had gone or when she planned to return. He sat at the kitchen table and considered the possibilities. She could have left to visit someone, though he had explicitly forbidden unsupervised outings. She could have gone to a store, though she had no money beyond the weekly allowance he had not yet provided. She could have fled, though that seemed illogical given the proximity of the interview and the consequences abandonment would trigger. Brennan waited. Hours passed. He did not call the police. He did not contact neighbors. He sat in the living room, watching the street through the front window. At one point, he retrieved the immigration binder and reviewed the interview preparation materials, as though Camille's absence was a temporary disruption that would resolve itself with time. By evening, she had not returned. Brennan prepared dinner for himself, ate in silence, and washed the dishes. He checked her room again. Nothing had changed. He called the prepaid phone. It rang 4 times and went to a generic voicemail message. He did not leave a message. On November 17th, 1 day before the interview, Brennan called USCIS and reported that his wife was ill and that they needed to reschedule. The representative asked if he could provide medical documentation. Brennan stated that he would submit it by mail and ended the call. The interview was rescheduled for January. That afternoon, Brennan filed a missing person report with the Plantation Police Department. He stated that Camille had left the house sometime during the night or early morning of November 16th without explanation. He described her as 5 feet 4 inches tall, approximately 110 pounds, with black hair and brown eyes. He provided a photograph taken shortly after their marriage. In the image, Camille wore a neutral expression and stood against a blank wall. The officer taking the report asked standard questions. Had there been an argument? No. Had she expressed intent to leave? No. Did she have friends or family in the area she might have contacted? Brennan stated that she had no close connections and that her family lived in Haiti. He mentioned the upcoming immigration interview and suggested that stress might have been a factor. The report was filed and entered into the system. Camille Laurent was classified as a voluntary missing adult. No immediate investigation was launched. Adults have the right to leave, and without evidence of foul play or incapacity, police resources are rarely allocated to active searches. Brennan returned home and resumed his routine. He maintained the house, completed his errands, and kept the schedule he had followed before Camille's arrival. Neighbors who noticed her absence assumed she had returned to Haiti or that the marriage had ended quietly. No one asked Brennan directly. He volunteered no information. 3 days after the disappearance, a postal worker delivering mail noticed an unusual smell near the side of Brennan's house, close to the air conditioning unit and a row of hedges that bordered the property line. The odor was faint but distinct, organic and wrong. The worker mentioned it to a neighbor who dismissed it as a dead animal, possibly a raccoon or possum that had crawled into the bushes. The smell intensified over the following week. By late November, it had become strong enough that a neighbor 2 houses down contacted the homeowners association, complaining about a sanitation issue. The association sent a courtesy letter to Brennan, requesting that he inspect his property for the source of the odor and address it promptly. Brennan did not respond to the letter. The smell continued. On December 3rd, 17 days after Camille Laurent was reported missing, a code enforcement officer from the city of Plantation responded to multiple complaints about an odor emanating from 4720 West Sunrise Boulevard, the address registered to Richard Brennan. The officer arrived mid-morning and immediately identified the smell as consistent with decomposition. The officer knocked on the front door. Brennan answered after a brief delay. He was dressed casually and appeared calm. The officer explained the reason for the visit and asked permission to inspect the exterior of the property. Brennan granted permission and accompanied the officer to the side yard where the smell was strongest. The source was located beneath a blue tarp, weighted down with landscaping stones, positioned between the air conditioning unit and a hedge line approximately 15 feet from the house. The officer asked Brennan what was under the tarp. Brennan stated that he did not know, that he had not placed it there, and that it must have been left by yard maintenance workers. The officer requested that Brennan lift the tarp. Brennan hesitated, then complied. Beneath the tarp was disturbed soil, loose and uneven. The odor intensified immediately. The officer stepped back and radioed for police assistance, citing possible human remains. Plantation police arrived within 12 minutes. The scene was secured. Brennan was asked to wait inside the house. He did not resist or request an attorney. Officers established a perimeter and contacted the Broward County Sheriff's Office, which dispatched a forensic team and homicide detectives. Excavation began that afternoon under controlled conditions. The soil was removed in layers and sifted for evidence. At a depth of approximately 2 feet, investigators uncovered human remains wrapped in a bedsheet and black plastic garbage bags secured with duct tape. The body was in an advanced state of decomposition, consistent with approximately 2 weeks of burial in South Florida's warm, humid climate. Preliminary examination at the scene indicated a small framed female. Clothing remnants matched the description of items Camille Laurent had been wearing in recent photographs. A prepaid cell phone was recovered near the body, its screen cracked, but the device intact. The SIM card was later extracted and analyzed. Richard Brennan was transported to the Plantation Police Department for questioning. He was not arrested at that time, but was informed that he was a person of interest. The interview was conducted in a standard interrogation room and recorded on video. Detectives asked Brennan to recount the events surrounding Camille's disappearance. He repeated the account from the missing person report. He woke on the morning of November 16th and found her gone. He had assumed she left voluntarily. He did not know where she went or why. When asked about the body found on his property, Brennan stated that he had no knowledge of it. He suggested that Camille might have returned to the house after leaving, encountered an intruder, and been killed. Detectives asked why he had not noticed the excavation or the tarp in his own yard. Brennan said he rarely used that side of the house and that he had been preoccupied with rescheduling the immigration interview. The interview lasted 3 hours. Brennan's answers remained consistent but implausible. He showed no visible emotion when informed that the remains were likely those of his wife. He did not ask how she died. He did not request to see the body or make arrangements. His affect was flat, his responses procedural. Forensic analysis moved quickly. The medical examiner confirmed the identity through dental records and a healed fracture in Camille's left wrist sustained during childhood. Cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the skull, consistent with multiple strikes from a heavy object. The injuries indicated close-range assault with significant force. There were no defensive wounds on her hands or arms, suggesting she had been incapacitated or unable to resist. The timeline was reconstructed through digital evidence. The prepaid phone recovered, with the body showed its last activity at 11:47 p.m. on November 15th, hours before Brennan claimed to have discovered her absence. Location data placed the phone inside the residence until activity ceased. No outgoing calls or messages were sent. The phone was powered down or destroyed shortly before midnight. Investigators obtained a search warrant for the house. Inside Camille's bedroom, luminol testing revealed trace amounts of blood on the floor near the bed, partially cleaned but not entirely removed. Additional blood evidence was found on a section of baseboard that had been wiped but not replaced. In the garage, detectives recovered a claw hammer with tissue residue embedded in the striking surface. Preliminary testing matched the residue to human biological material. Brennan was arrested on December 5th and charged with second-degree murder and abuse of a corpse. During processing, he declined to make a statement. His demeanor remained unchanged, controlled, detached, unreadable. The case that had begun as a missing person report had become a homicide investigation. The woman who had traveled thousands of miles seeking stability and legal status had been killed in a suburban house by the man who had promised to help her. The evidence suggested premeditation, concealment, and a calculated effort to maintain the appearance of normalcy even as her body decomposed 15 feet from where he slept. The trial began in June 2019, 7 months after Camille Laurent's body was discovered. Richard Brennan entered a plea of not guilty. His court-appointed attorney argued that the evidence was circumstantial and that the prosecution could not definitively prove Brennan had killed his wife. The defense suggested alternative scenarios: an unknown intruder, a crime committed during Brennan's absence, a death resulting from accident rather than intent. The prosecution presented a methodical case built on forensic evidence, timeline analysis, and motive. The medical examiner testified that Camille had died from blunt force trauma delivered with enough force to fracture her skull in 3 places. The injuries were inconsistent with a fall or accidental contact. They were consistent with intentional, repeated strikes. Digital forensics placed Camille's phone inside the residence until 11:47 p.m. on November 15th. Activity ceased abruptly, with no outgoing distress calls or messages. Brennan's phone showed no unusual activity that night, no calls to emergency services, no evidence of alarm or discovery. The lack of response, the prosecution argued, indicated foreknowledge. The hammer recovered from the garage was entered into evidence. DNA analysis confirmed the presence of Camille's blood and tissue on the striking surface. Brennan's fingerprints were identified on the handle. The defense could not explain why the tool used to kill Camille Laurent was stored in a location only Brennan accessed. Blood evidence found in Camille's bedroom, though cleaned, remained detectable under forensic testing. The pattern suggested an attempt to eliminate traces rather than a panicked response to accidental injury. The timeline between her death and the missing person report, more than 12 hours, allowed ample opportunity for concealment and rehearsal. Financial records were introduced, showing Brennan's control over all household funds. Camille had no independent access to money, transportation, or communication. Her isolation was complete. Immigration documents demonstrated that her legal status depended entirely on Brennan's continued sponsorship, creating a power imbalance the prosecution characterized as a tool of coercion and captivity. Testimony from Camille's former roommate provided context. She described Camille as hopeful when she first married, but increasingly withdrawn in the months that followed. During their last phone conversation in early November, Camille had said she felt trapped. She did not elaborate. The roommate had assumed marital difficulties, not danger. Brennan did not testify. His attorney presented no witnesses and rested the defense on the argument that the prosecution had not met the burden of proof beyond reasonable doubt. The strategy failed. After 4 days of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on both counts: second-degree murder and abuse of a corpse. Sentencing was scheduled for August. At the sentencing hearing, the prosecution requested the maximum allowable term. The judge acknowledged Brennan's lack of prior criminal history, but noted the calculated nature of the crime, the vulnerable position of the victim, and the attempt to destroy evidence and mislead investigators. Aggravating factors outweighed mitigation. Richard Brennan was sentenced to 30 years in the Florida Department of Corrections for second-degree murder and 5 years concurrent for abuse of a corpse. Under Florida law, he would be required to serve at least 85% of the sentence before eligibility for release. At 72 years old, the sentence was effectively life. Brennan displayed no emotion when the sentence was read. He was led from the courtroom without incident. Camille Laurent's body was released to her family after the trial concluded. Her mother, unable to afford travel to the United States, arranged through a Haitian consulate liaison to have her daughter's remains repatriated. Camille was buried in a cemetery outside Port-au-Prince, in a service attended by family and members of her former church. No representatives from the United States were present. The immigration petition filed by Richard Brennan was formally closed. The case file was marked terminated due to the death of the beneficiary. No legal status was ever granted. Camille Laurent had died as she had lived in Florida, undocumented, isolated, and unprotected by the system she had hoped would offer her security. In the aftermath, no policy changes were implemented. The mechanisms that enabled the crime remained intact. Marriage-based immigration dependency, lack of oversight in spousal visa cases, limited intervention in domestic isolation, and insufficient resources for victims without legal status or financial means. Brennan's house was sold by court order to satisfy restitution obligations. A portion of the proceeds was transferred to Camille's family in Haiti. It was not enough to repay the money borrowed for her brother's surgery. It was not enough to compensate for a daughter lost. The case closed with one conviction, one burial, and a stack of documents in a courthouse archive. The record showed a transaction that began with a promise of help and ended with a body wrapped in plastic beneath a tarp. It showed a system that treats immigration as paperwork rather than protection, and marriage as contract rather than commitment. Camille Laurent had crossed an ocean to escape poverty and build a future. She found neither. What she found instead was Richard Brennan, a man who saw her desperation as opportunity and her trust as weakness. And when she became inconvenient, when the facade of marriage became more burdensome than beneficial, he eliminated the problem with the same clinical detachment he had applied to property assessments and household budgets. The trial ended. The sentence was served. But the conditions that made Camille Laurent vulnerable, that placed her in a house with a man who controlled every aspect of her existence, remained unchanged. The next case would come. The next victim would arrive. And the system would process the paperwork without asking the questions that might have saved a life.